The day Nathan Voss refused to shake Devin Carter's hand was the day Zenwell Capital's fate was sealed. "I don't shake hands with janitors," Voss had sneered, unaware that the humble man in the maintenance uniform wasn't just another invisible worker but the billionaire founder of Carter Equity Group. For 3 months, Devin had mopped floors and emptied trash, silently observing the toxic culture from within. He'd seen everything: the manipulated reports, the mistreated staff, the arrogance of those in power. Now, watching Voss stride away with his entourage of snickering executives, Devin made his decision. The $4 billion investment Zenwell desperately needed would come, but on terms none of them could imagine. Sometimes the most powerful lessons came from the most unexpected teachers. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. The morning sun filtered through the glass facade of the Zenwell Capital building, casting long shadows across the polished marble floor of the lobby. Devin Carter adjusted his navy blue uniform, the word maintenance stitched in white thread above his breast pocket. At 45, his close-cropped hair showed touches of gray at the temples, and fine lines had begun to form around his eyes that noticed everything. Devin moved methodically through the lobby, emptying trash bins and wiping down surfaces with practiced efficiency. He nodded politely to the stream of professionals entering the building, offering a warm "good morning" to each person who passed. Most hurried by without acknowledgement, their attention captured by phones or the day's concerns. "Morning, Mr. Wallace," Devin called to a middle-aged executive who entered through the revolving doors, briefcase in hand. Wallace barely glanced up, offering a distracted "morning" before continuing toward the elevator bank. This was the rhythm of Devin's days at Zenwell, a prestigious investment firm that occupied the top 15 floors of the 60-story tower. The finance professionals who worked there existed in a different world than the maintenance staff, a world of boardrooms and billion-dollar decisions, of tailored suits and luxury watches. Devin moved invisibly through their spaces, keeping everything pristine while remaining largely unseen. At 8:45 a.m., a commotion near the entrance drew Devin's attention. A cluster of executives had gathered, their postures straightening as a town car pulled up to the curb outside. "He's here," one of them whispered excitedly. The car door opened, and out stepped Nathan Voss, Zenwell's newly appointed CEO. Tall and imposing in a charcoal suit that must have cost more than Devin earned in a month, Voss had the sharp features and confident stride of someone accustomed to commanding rooms. His salt and pepper hair was perfectly styled, and his steel blue eyes surveyed the building as if he already owned it. "Welcome to Zenwell, Mr. Voss," one of the executives greeted. Extending his hand, Voss smiled tightly, shaking hands with each executive in turn. "Good to finally be here. We have big things ahead." Devin watched the exchange from a discreet distance as he wiped down a glass directory display. He had read about Voss in the financial press, a ruthless corporate strategist who had turned around 3 companies in the past decade, making millions for investors and himself in the process. His methods were controversial, often involving aggressive cost-cutting and layoffs, but no one could argue with his results. The executive welcome party moved toward the private elevator bank, the one reserved for C-suite executives and VIP clients. Devin was just finishing up nearby when he noticed Voss had dropped a leather-bound portfolio on the floor. He quickly moved to retrieve it. "Excuse me, sir," Devin said, approaching the group with the portfolio extended. "You dropped this." Voss turned, his eyes narrowing slightly as they landed on Devin's uniform. The elevator doors opened, and the executives began to file in. "Thank you," Voss said flatly, taking the portfolio without making eye contact. Devin reached out his hand. "I'm Devin Carter. I help keep things running smoothly around here." For a moment, the lobby seemed to go silent. The executives exchanged uncomfortable glances. Voss looked at Devin's extended hand, then back to his face, a flicker of disbelief crossing his features. "I don't shake hands with janitors," Voss said, his voice carrying in the marble lobby. "Germs, you understand." A few of the executives snickered. Others looked away, embarrassed. Voss stepped into the elevator, and the doors closed behind the group, leaving Devin standing alone, hands still partially extended. Devin slowly lowered his arm, his expression unchanging save for a slight tightening around his eyes. He turned and went back to his cleaning cart, continuing his work as if nothing had happened by lunchtime. The story had spread throughout the building. Devon could feel the glances as he worked, could hear the whispers as he passed. Did you hear what happened with the new CEO and the janitor? Can you believe he actually tried to shake his hand? What was he thinking? In the employee cafeteria, Devon sat alone at a small table near the window, eating a sandwich he had brought from home. Two young analysts at a nearby table didn't bother lowering their voices. I mean, Voss wasn't wrong, one said with a laugh. Who knows where those hands have been? Still pretty harsh, the other replied. But that's Voss's reputation. No nonsense. No sentimentality. That's why he makes the big bucks. Devon ate methodically, his eyes focused on the city skyline visible through the window. He seemed not to hear them, though nothing escaped his notice. Later that afternoon, Devon was cleaning the glass walls of a conference room when Clara Thompson, the receptionist from the 58th floor, approached him. Clara was in her mid-30s, with warm brown eyes and a gentle demeanor that stood out in the cutthroat atmosphere of Zenwell. "Hey, Devon," she said softly. "I heard about what happened this morning." "I'm sorry." Devon offered her a smile. "Nothing to be sorry about, Clara. Some people see the uniform, not the person." "It wasn't right," she insisted. "Everyone's talking about it. HR is pretending they didn't hear anything, of course." "Of course," Devon nodded, continuing to wipe the glass in smooth, even strokes. "How are your classes going?" Clara was taking night courses in business administration, trying to advance her career while supporting herself and her 10-year-old daughter as a single mother. "Honestly, I'm struggling with the financial analysis course," she admitted. "The professor moves so fast, and I never had a head for numbers." "I might be able to help," Devon offered. "I've picked up a thing or two listening to these folks talk. All day." Clara laughed. "I'd appreciate that. Maybe during lunch tomorrow." "It's a date," Devon agreed with a warm smile. That evening, as the Zenwell offices emptied, Devon made his final rounds. The executive floor was quiet, the offices dark except for the corner suite where Nathan Voss was still working. Through the glass walls, Devon could see him pacing, speaking animatedly into a phone. Devon moved quietly, emptying trash bins and wiping down surfaces. As he worked, he could hear fragments of Voss's conversation. "The Santoro Group is bringing $4 billion to the table." "Yes, $4 billion. We've got this locked down. The board is completely behind me. This will put Zenwell on a whole new level." Voss glanced up, noticing Devon for the first time. His eyes narrowed, and he turned away, lowering his voice. Devon finished his work and headed to the employee locker room to change. He removed his uniform, replacing it with a simple but well-made button-down shirt and slacks. As he left the building, he nodded to the security guard at the desk. "Night, Jim." "Night, Devon. Take it easy." The residential building where Devon lived was modest but well-maintained, a stark contrast to the luxury high-rises favored by Zenwell executives. His one-bedroom apartment on the 4th floor was simple and neat, with bookshelves lining one wall. But what would have surprised anyone from Zenwell was the content of those shelves: volumes on investment strategy, financial analysis, corporate governance, and economic theory. Well-worn copies of The Intelligent Investor and Security Analysis sat alongside more recent texts on private equity and venture capital. Devon moved to a small desk in the corner where a whiteboard hung on the wall, covered in complex financial notations and corporate structure diagrams. At the center was the name Zenwell Capital, surrounded by arrows connecting to various subsidiaries and investment vehicles. He sat down at the desk and opened a laptop. After entering a complex password, he pulled up a spreadsheet filled with numbers, profit margins, debt ratios, cash flow projections. The data told a story, one that contradicted the glossy image Zenwell presented to the world. Devon's phone rang. The caller ID showed Mr. Santoro. "Hello, Anthony," Devon answered, his tone shifting to something more polished and confident than the humble demeanor he displayed at work. "Devon," a deep voice responded. "How's our little project coming along?" "Exactly as expected," Devon replied. "Voss is planning to pitch for your investment next week." "He's confident." "And should he be?" Santoro asked. Devon glanced at his whiteboard. "That's what I'm determining. I need a little more time." "You're the only person I know who'd go to these lengths for due diligence," Santoro chuckled. Most people just hire accountants. Most people miss what's happening right in front of them, Devon replied. I'll have my assessment soon. After ending the call, Devon pulled out a tablet and opened a secure file. The header read, Zenwell Capital, Due Diligence Report, Confidential. He scrolled through pages of financial analysis, his expression growing more troubled with each swipe. It's worse than I thought, he muttered to himself. The next morning, Devon arrived at Zenwell early, as was his habit. The lobby was nearly empty, save for a few early risers and the night security guard preparing to end his shift that as Devon gathered his cleaning supplies from the maintenance closet. He noticed Gary, one of the day security guards, watching him with unusual intensity. Morning, Gary, Devon called, his voice friendly. Morning, Gary replied, his tone less warm than usual. You were up on 58 pretty late last night. Devon nodded casually. Just finishing my rounds. Some of those executives work late. Right, Gary said slowly. Thing is, I saw you going into the file room. That area needs special clearance. Devon's expression remained neutral, but his mind raced. Really? The door was open, and my supervisor asked me to make sure all the rooms on that floor were cleaned. Gary didn't look convinced. Just be careful where you wander, all right? Some places are off limits, even for cleaning staff. Noted, Devon replied with an easy smile. Thanks for the heads up. As Gary walked away, Devon's smile faded. He would need to be more careful. By mid-morning, the executive floor was buzzing with activity. Devon moved through the space quietly, emptying trash bins and cleaning surfaces, all while keeping his ears open to in a small conference room. Two financial analysts were speaking in hushed tones. The Q3 numbers don't make sense, one was saying. There's no way we hit those projections legitimately. Keep your voice down, the other hissed. Voss has people everywhere. We just need to make it look good until the Santoro deal closes. But we're leveraged to the hilt. If anyone looks closely, no one will. That's the point of all this window dressing. They fell silent as Devon entered the room. Sorry to interrupt, he said politely. Just need to clean up quickly. Take your time, one analyst said dismissively, as both gathered their papers and left. Devon worked methodically, but his mind processed what he'd heard. It confirmed what his research had already suggested. Zenwell was in trouble, masking significant losses and manipulating financial statements to attract investors. Later that day, Devon was mopping the floor near the legal department when he noticed a young attorney looking stressed, surrounded by stacks of documents. Excuse me, Devon said. Is it all right if I clean around here? The attorney glanced up, distracted. Yeah, sure. Just don't touch any of the papers. Devon worked quietly for a few minutes before speaking again. Looks like a big case. The attorney sighed. Not a case. Due diligence for the Santoro investment. We're supposed to disclose any potential liabilities, but the executives keep redacting half my reports. That sounds stressful, Devon commented. Is that legal? The attorney looked around nervously. Just between us? Not really. But what am I supposed to do? Go against the CEO? Just curious, Devon said with a shrug. I hear things around the building, you know? Lots of talk about this Santoro deal being make or break. You have no idea, the attorney muttered, turning back to his work. As Devon continued his rounds, he made similar casual conversations with people in HR, finance, and operations. Always just a curious janitor, always just making small talk. And people talked to him, seeing only the uniform, not recognizing that the man inside it understood every technical term and financial concept they mentioned. That afternoon, Devon was cleaning near the boardroom when Nathan Voss arrived for a meeting with Zenwell's board of directors. Voss barely glanced at Devon as he passed, as if the janitor were just another piece of furniture. Through the glass walls, Devon could see the meeting unfold. He couldn't hear the words, but the body language told a story. Several board members looked concerned, gesturing at presentation slides that showed declining graphs. Voss remained standing, his posture confident as he pointed to other slides, his expression intense and persuasive. One board member, an older woman with silver hair, seemed particularly skeptical, shaking her head repeatedly. Voss eventually turned to her directly, saying something that made the other board members shift uncomfortably in their seats. After the meeting, Voss strode out, his face tight, with barely contained anger. The board members followed, looking troubled. Nathan, We're just asking for transparency, the silver-haired woman was saying. And I'm giving you results, Margaret, Voss snapped. The Santoro Group is bringing $4 billion in private equity. Once that deal closes, none of these temporary setbacks will matter. But the aggressive restructuring, the accounting practices, are all standard in this industry, Voss cut her off. I was brought in to transform this company, not to coddle it. If some of you can't handle my methods, perhaps it's time to reconsider your positions on this board. The threat hung in the air as Voss walked away, leaving the board members looking stunned. Later that day, Devon was wiping down the reception desk on the 58th floor when Clara approached, looking upset. Everything okay? He asked quietly. Clara glanced around to make sure no one was listening. Davis from HR just told me I'm being moved to the mailroom. Effective immediately. What? Why? Officially? Organizational restructuring. Unofficially, Clara lowered her voice further. I refused to make dinner reservations for Thompson and his girlfriend when his wife called asking where he was. Thompson was a senior manager known for his inappropriate behavior with female staff. That's not right, Devon said, his eyes hardening slightly. It's how things work here, Clara shrugged, trying to hide how upset she was. Single mom with bills to pay. I can't afford to make waves. Let me see what I can do, Devon said. What could you possibly do? Clara asked, not unkindly. Devon just smiled. I've picked up a few things around here. That night, after his shift, Devon sat at his desk at home. He carefully drafted an email, including specific company policies, dates, and HR guidelines. The email detailed how Clara's reassignment violated several internal protocols and potentially constituted retaliation. The next morning, Clara found the draft in her personal email. The sender was anonymous, but she knew immediately who had sent it. After taking a deep breath, she forwarded it to the head of HR, copying the legal department. By lunchtime, Clara had been reinstated at her reception desk, and Thompson was avoiding eye contact with everyone. How did you know all that legal and HR terminology? Clara asked Devon when she saw him later. I listened, he said simply. And I read. Libraries are free. Clara studied him with new interest. You're not just a janitor, are you? Devon smiled enigmatically. We're all more than our job titles, Clara. The following day, Devon was cleaning the executive bathroom when his phone vibrated with a text message. Café Lucerne, 12:30. At 12:30, Devon, now changed into casual but well-fitting street clothes, entered a small cafe several blocks from Zenwell. In a corner booth sat a woman in her early 40s, elegantly dressed in a tailored suit, her dark hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. Sadie, Devon greeted, sliding into the seat across from her. The man who could have owned Wall Street. She replied with a hint of amusement. How's life as a janitor treating you? It's enlightening, Devon answered. You'd be amazed what people say when they think you're invisible. And Zenwell? As bad as you suspected? Devon nodded grimly. Worse. They're hiding massive liabilities, cooking the books, and betting everything on Santoro's investment. Which isn't coming, Sadie said, since Santoro is you. Not yet, Devon corrected. I need to understand what's happening from the inside first. These are people's livelihoods at stake. Sadie leaned forward. Devon, I've known you for 15 years. You walked away from a brilliant career to build Carter equity from nothing. You've succeeded beyond anyone's wildest dreams. Why this? Why now? Devon was quiet for a moment. Zenwell manages my father's old pension fund. Did you know that? They've been slowly bleeding it dry with fees and bad investments while telling the retirees everything is fine. So this is personal, Sadie said softly. It's about accountability, Devon replied. The financial world runs on trust. But who holds firms like Zenwell accountable when they betray that trust? Someone has to. And that someone has to be you. Working as a janitor instead of using your considerable power directly. Money and power don't always reveal the truth, Sadie. Sometimes they hide it. Devon sighed. Wall Street doesn't need another billionaire throwing his weight around. It needs honesty. The mysterious moral compass of Devin Carter, Sadie smiled. Never predictable, always true. Not if it owns your soul, Devon said quietly. What? Something my father used to say about wealth. Money is power, son, but not if it owns your soul. Their lunch was interrupted by Devon's phone buzzing. He checked it and frowned. What is it? Sadie asked. Someone at Zenwell has been asking questions about me. A security guard reported seeing me in a restricted area. Is your cover blown? Not yet, Devin said, standing. But I need to move faster. That afternoon, Devin took advantage of a fire drill to slip into the finance department while it was empty. With quick, practiced movements, he accessed a computer that had been left unlocked in the rush to evacuate. He inserted a small flash drive and copied several files, his eyes constantly checking the door. Just as he finished, he heard voices approaching. Devin quickly moved to the window with his cleaning supplies, pretending to wipe the glass as two financial analysts returned to their desks. "Didn't they evacuate you?" one of them asked, surprised to see him. "Just finishing up here," Devin replied casually. "Got permission to stay and complete my work." Later, as Devin was emptying trash in the executive suite, he overheard a conversation between Voss and his chief of staff. "Sir," one of the analysts mentioned something strange, the chief of staff was saying. "Apparently, the janitor has been asking unusually informed questions about our financial practices." Voss looked up sharply. "What janitor?" "The one from the lobby. Carter, I think his name is. The one who tried to shake my hand." Voss's face darkened. "What kind of questions?" "About leveraging, disclosure requirements, pension fund management. Not typical janitor small talk." Voss waved dismissively. "He probably overhears things and repeats them to sound smart. These service people are always trying to seem more important than they are. Should we look into his background?" "Why would I waste time on a nobody?" Voss scoffed. "We have $4 billion on the line. Focus on what matters." As they continued talking, Devin moved silently away, his expression unreadable. That evening, after changing out of his uniform, Devin left the Zenwell building and walked several blocks to a sleek office tower in the financial district. He entered the lobby, nodding to the security guard who recognized him immediately. "Evening, Mr. Carter," the guard said respectfully. "Evening, Robert." Devin replied that he took the elevator to the 40th floor and entered a minimalist office suite. The reception area was elegantly appointed, with a simple logo on the wall, Carter Equity Group. As Devin walked through the empty office toward his private suite, he passed a wall of accolades, financial industry awards, framed articles from Forbes and the Wall Street Journal praising the firm's ethical approach and remarkable returns. In his office, a gold nameplate on the desk read, "Devin Carter, founder and CEO." Devin sat down heavily in his chair, looking out at the city lights. His phone rang, Santoro again. "I've seen enough," Devin said without preamble. "Zenwell is a house of cards. The $4 billion would be throwing good money after bad. So we walk away?" Santoro asked. "No," Devin replied, his voice hardening with resolve. "We clean house." The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble lobby of the Zenwell Capital building as Devin Carter arrived for his shift. The whispers followed him now. Hushed conversations that paused when he walked by, curious glances from staff who had previously ignored him. Word had spread about the janitor who asked strangely informed questions, who seemed to know more than he should. Devin maintained his routine, moving through the building with the same humble efficiency he always displayed. But beneath the surface, his mind was calculating, processing, preparing for what was to come. In his office on the top floor, Nathan Voss paced nervously. The Santoro group had gone silent over the weekend. No responses to emails, calls left unreturned. The $4 billion investment he had promised the board suddenly seemed less certain. "Get Santoro on the phone," he barked at his assistant. "I don't care what you have to do." "We've been trying, sir," she replied, her voice tense. "Their office says Mr. Santoro is unavailable until further notice." Voss slammed his fist on the desk. "This is unacceptable. That money was guaranteed." Outside in the hallway, Devin quietly mopped the floor, catching every word through the half-open door. Across town, in the sleek offices of Carter Equity Group, Sadie Marshall reviewed the documents Devin had gathered from Zenwell. "This is worse than we thought," she said as a man in an expensive suit entered the room. "Anthony, take a look at these projections. They're fabricated." Anthony Santoro, the same Mr. Santoro that Voss was desperately trying to reach, frowned as he studied the papers. "So my instinct was right," he said. "Devin was smart to investigate personally." "He always is," Sadie replied. "The question is, what's his endgame here? He could have just declined the investment based on these findings." Santoro smiled knowingly. Devon doesn't just want to walk away. He wants to fix things. Back at Zenwell, Clara approached Devon during his lunch break in the cafeteria. I brought you coffee, she said, setting down a cup and joining him at the small table by the window. Just a small thank you for helping me with that HR situation. You don't need to thank me, Devon replied with a warm smile. I do though, Clara insisted. I've been at Zenwell for 7 years, and you're the first person who actually stood up for me. She studied him curiously. Can I ask you something? Why are you working as a janitor? You're clearly educated, and the way you understood those HR policies. Devon considered her for a moment. Let's just say I'm exactly where I need to be right now. That's cryptic, Clara laughed. Life sometimes is, Devon replied. How's your daughter doing with her science project? Still struggling, Clara sighed. Between work and night school, I barely have time to help her. Devon reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. This might help. Clara opened it and gasped. Inside was a scholarship offer to Westridge Academy, one of the city's most prestigious private schools, along with a letter offering Clara a position as community relations director at a nonprofit foundation, at 3 times her current salary. What is this? She whispered, looking up at Devon with wide eyes. Is this real? Very real, Devon assured her. No strings attached. But how? What? Devon smiled. Let's just say I have connections, and I believe in investing in good people. Clara stared at him, realization dawning. Who are you, really? Before Devon could answer, the cafeteria doors burst open. Nathan Voss strode in, followed by 2 security guards and Gary, the guard who had noticed Devon in the restricted area. That's him, Gary said, pointing at Devon. Voss approached their table, his face flushed with anger. I want you out of this building, he snapped at Devon. Now, on what grounds? Devon asked calmly, not rising from his seat. Unauthorized access to restricted areas, Voss said. Corporate espionage. Gary here says he saw you accessing financial records. That's not true, Clara interjected. Devon was just having lunch with me. Stay out of this, Voss warned her. Unless you want to join him in the unemployment line. Clara fell silent, but her eyes blazed with indignation. Mr. Voss, Devon said, his voice taking on a new quality, controlled, authoritative, nothing like the humble janitor Voss had dismissed. I think we should discuss this privately. There's nothing to discuss, Voss sneered. Security will escort you out. Devon stood slowly, straightening to his full height. The change in his demeanor was subtle but unmistakable. Suddenly, he didn't look like a janitor at all. You might want to reconsider, Devon said quietly. Given that the Santoro Group has been conducting due diligence on Zenwell for the past 3 months. Voss froze. What did you say? Your $4 billion investment, Devon continued. Anthony Santoro wanted a complete picture of Zenwell's operations before committing that kind of capital, including its corporate culture. What do you know about it? Voss demanded, his confident facade cracking slightly. Devon reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. He handed it to Voss, whose face drained of color as he read it. Voss couldn't finish the sentence. Devin Carter, he confirmed. Founder and CEO of Carter Equity Group. Principal investor in the Santoro Group. And yes, until about 30 seconds ago, a janitor at Zenwell Capital. The cafeteria had gone completely silent. Every eye was fixed on the scene unfolding before them. This is absurd, Voss sputtered. Some kind of joke. Call Anthony Santoro, Devon suggested. Ask him why he hasn't returned your calls. Or better yet, let's go up to your office and I'll call him for you. 15 minutes later, Devon sat across from Voss in the CEO's office, now wearing a suit that his driver had delivered. The transformation was remarkable. Gone was any trace of the humble janitor. In his place sat a man who radiated quiet confidence and authority. What? Voss finally asked, breaking the tense silence. Why this charade? I don't invest billions without understanding a company from the ground up. Devon replied. The numbers only tell part of the story. The people tell the rest. So you pretended to be a janitor to spy on my company. I took a position that allowed me to observe how Zenwell really operates, Devon corrected. How management treats employees. How decisions are made. Whether the culture matches the glossy investor presentations. Voss's jaw tightened. And your conclusion? Zenwell has potential, Devon said carefully. But its leadership has created a toxic culture where ethics are secondary to appearance, where those at the bottom are treated as invisible, and where financial statements are massaged to hide troubling realities. You have no proof of that, Voss said, but his voice lacked conviction. I have 3 months of observations and documentation, Devin countered, including the board presentation where you deliberately withheld information about Zenwell's leveraged position, including the directive you gave to restate earnings to make them appear 15% higher than reality. Voss paled further. What do you want? Originally, I came to evaluate a potential investment, Devon said. Now, I'm more interested in accountability. Before Voss could respond, his phone rang. He answered it, listening tensely before hanging up with a muttered curse. The board wants to meet, he told Devon. Apparently, they received an anonymous report detailing financial irregularities. Devon nodded. I'm aware. My team compiled it. Your team? Voss repeated bitterly. Of course. As Voss gathered his things for the emergency board meeting, Devon's phone chimed with a text message. It was from Clara. Is it true? You're really a CEO? Devon typed back. We'll talk soon. In the meantime, that scholarship and job offer are real. The board meeting was already underway when Voss arrived with Devon. The directors looked up in surprise at the unfamiliar man accompanying their CEO. Nathan, what's going on? Margaret, the silver-haired board member, asked. And who is this, Voss said tersely, is Devin Carter. A murmur ran through the room. Several board members clearly recognized the name. Of Carter Equity, one asked incredulously. The same, Devin confirmed. I believe you've been discussing a report about Zenwell's financial practices. You're responsible for this? Margaret asked, holding up a thick document. My team compiled it based on my observations, Devin explained. I've spent the past 3 months working undercover as a janitor here at Zenwell. The board erupted in shocked exclamations. When the noise subsided, Margaret spoke again. Why would the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar investment firm pose as a janitor? To understand what Zenwell really is, Devin said simply. Not what it pretends to be in boardrooms and investor presentations, but what happens in its hallways and break rooms. How it treats people when no one important is watching. And what did you find? Margaret asked, her expression grave. A company with tremendous potential being undermined by leadership that values appearance over substance, Devin replied. A culture where those at the bottom are treated as invisible, where ethical corners are cut, and where financial statements are manipulated to hide troubling realities. Voss began to protest, but Margaret silenced him with a raised hand. The report contains specific allegations about financial misrepresentations, she said. Are these your findings as well, Mr. Carter? They are, Devin confirmed. And I've shared them with the SEC as a matter of legal obligation. The color drained from Voss's face. You did what? The law requires disclosure of certain financial irregularities, Devin said calmly. I'm sure Zenwell's legal team can explain the details. Margaret turned to Voss. Nathan, I think you should step out while the board discusses this matter. You can't be serious, Voss protested. You're going to listen to this spy? Mr. Carter is the principal investor behind the Santoro Group, another board member pointed out. The same group you've been promising would save us with a $4 billion investment. An investment that will not be forthcoming under current leadership, Devin added that as Voss was escorted out. His face twisted with rage, Devin addressed the board again. I came to Zenwell to evaluate an investment opportunity, he said. What I found was a company with strong fundamentals being mismanaged. I believe with proper leadership and cultural reform, Zenwell could thrive. And you want to be that leadership? Margaret asked shrewdly. Devin smiled. Not necessarily. But I am prepared to make a significant investment, conditional on leadership and cultural changes. As the meeting continued, Devin outlined his vision for Zenwell's transformation. By the time it concluded, the board had voted to suspend Nathan Voss pending a full investigation and had invited Devin to submit a formal investment proposal. When Devin left the boardroom, he found Clara waiting anxiously in the hallway. Is it true? She asked again, her voice barely above a whisper. Devin nodded. I'm sorry for the deception, Clara. It was necessary. All this time. She began, then stopped, shaking her head in disbelief. The scholarship? The job offer? Both legitimate. Devon assured her. In fact, I'd like to offer you something else as well. He handed her a business card. Zenwell is going to need a chief culture officer, someone who understands what it's like to work at every level of the company. Someone with integrity and compassion. Clara stared at the card in her hand. Me? But I'm just a receptionist. There's no such thing as just anything, Clara, Devon said gently. Every role has dignity. Every person has value. That's the first lesson Zenwell needs to learn. As news of the dramatic boardroom confrontation spread throughout the building, Devon made his way to the maintenance department. He found his fellow janitors gathered in their break room, discussing the rumors in disbelief. It can't be true, one was saying. Devon? Our Devon. When he entered, still wearing his suit, a hush fell over the room. So it is true. Jim, the older janitor who had trained him, said softly. Parts of it, Devon acknowledged. I'm here to thank you all. You welcomed me, taught me, treated me with respect. That means more than you know. But you're really a billionaire? Someone asked incredulously. Labels aren't important, Devon replied. What matters is how we treat each other. And speaking of that, he continued, I've proposed a new compensation structure for Zenwell's maintenance staff as part of my investment. Full benefits, educational assistance, and a significant raise. The room erupted in cheers and disbelieving laughter as Devon left the building that evening. He noticed Nathan Voss waiting by the curb, his face dark with suppressed rage. You won't get away with this, Voss said as Devon approached. You think you can just walk in and take over my company? Not your company, Devon corrected. And I haven't taken anything. The board made its decision based on facts. You manipulated them, Voss accused. You manipulated everyone with your janitor act. I simply showed them who you really are, Devon replied. Just as you showed me who you are the day you refused to shake my hand. Voss's face contorted with anger. This isn't over, Carter. You've made a powerful enemy. Perhaps, Devon acknowledged. But I've also made many friends. That's the difference. Between us, Nathan, you see people as either useful or invisible. I see them as human beings worthy of dignity regardless of their position. As Voss stormed away, Devon's phone rang. It was Anthony Santoro. I hear you've had an eventful day, Santoro said, amusement in his voice. You could say that, Devon replied. The board's already reached out to finalize the investment terms, Santoro continued. They seem quite eager now that Voss is out of the picture. Let's proceed cautiously, Devon advised. Zenwell needs time to heal before it can grow. Always. The long game with you, Santoro chuckled. By the way, you made the financial news. Billionaire goes undercover as janitor to expose corporate fraud. Your PR team is going to have a field day. Devon sighed. I wasn't looking for publicity. You never are, Santoro replied. That's why people trust you. The next morning, Devon arrived at Zenwell not through the service entrance as he had for the past 3 months, but through the main lobby. Employees stared and whispered as he passed, the story of the billionaire janitor having spread like wildfire overnight. The board had called an emergency meeting to formalize their preliminary agreements with Devon's firm. As he rode the executive elevator to the top floor, Devon reflected on how differently people treated him now. The same security guards who had barely noticed him before now stood at attention. The same executives who had ignored him now smiled eagerly. The boardroom was tense when he arrived. Margaret, the silver-haired board member, approached him immediately. Mr. Carter, we have a situation, she said quietly. Nathan Voss is here. He's demanding to address the board before we vote on your proposal. It's his right, Devon acknowledged. Let him speak. When Voss entered, his usual polished appearance was slightly disheveled, his eyes burning with barely contained fury. He carried a leather portfolio, the same one Devon had returned to him on that first day. Gentlemen, ladies, Voss began, his voice tight. I understand you're prepared to hand over control of Zenwell to Mr. Carter based on his theatrical performance. Yesterday, we're considering an investment proposal that would give Carter Equity a significant stake in Zenwell, Margaret corrected. And our decision is based on financial irregularities that you have yet to explain. Voss smiled thinly. Irregularities that conveniently came to light through Mr. Carter's espionage. But what do we really know about Devin Carter? Has anyone bothered to check? He opened his portfolio and removed several documents. Carter Equity Group began quietly purchasing Zenwell shares 3 months ago, the exact time Mr. Carter infiltrated our company. He now controls nearly 12% of outstanding shares. The board members exchanged glances. That's a matter of public record, Devon said calmly. All properly disclosed in SEC filings. Perhaps, Voss conceded. But it raises questions. About your motives. This wasn't about due diligence. This was a planned takeover from the beginning. I began purchasing shares because I believed in Zenwell's potential, Devon replied. What I discovered during my time here only confirmed that the company has value, but needs new leadership. How convenient, Voss sneered. And now you're positioning yourself as some kind of corporate savior. He turned to the board. This man lied to everyone in this building for 3 months. He abused his position to access confidential information. And now he wants control. I want reform, Devin corrected, starting with how Zenwell treats its employees. As if on cue, the boardroom door opened, and Clara entered, looking nervous but determined. "Excuse the interruption," she said. "Mr. Carter asked me to join this meeting." The receptionist, Voss laughed incredulously. "This is a board meeting, not a staff picnic." "Clara Thompson has been with Zenwell for 7 years," Devon said. "She understands this company's culture better than anyone in this room, including me. I've asked her to serve as interim chief culture officer as part of my proposed investment." "This is absurd," Voss sputtered. "You can't possibly be considering this." "Actually," Margaret interjected, "the board is very interested in Ms. Thompson's perspective. Please have a seat." As Clara took a seat at the table, Voss's face reddened. "This is a mockery of corporate governance. You're going to take advice from a receptionist. We're going to listen to someone who treats people like people," Devon replied evenly. "Something you've consistently failed to do, Nathan. You don't know the first thing about running a company like Zenwell," Voss shot back. "Playing janitor for a few months doesn't qualify you to judge me or my methods." "Perhaps not," Devon conceded. "But my 20 years in finance, managing a portfolio that has consistently outperformed the market, might. As might the fact that Carter Equity has never had a single ethics violation or SEC inquiry. Until now," Voss said with a cold smile. He pulled out another document from his portfolio. "I filed a formal complaint with the SEC alleging corporate espionage and securities fraud. Your little janitor game is going to cost you, Carter." The room fell silent. Devon remained calm, studying Voss thoughtfully. "Is there anything else you'd like to share with the board, Nathan?" he asked. "Just this," Voss replied, his confidence returning. "You may have fooled everyone with your humble act, but I see through you. This is a hostile takeover disguised as a moral crusade." Devon nodded to Margaret, who pressed a button on the conference phone in the center of the table. "Mr. Edwards, are you there?" she asked. "Yes, Miss Holloway," a voice responded. "I can hear everything clearly." "For the record," Margaret said, "Mr. Edwards is Zenwell's outside counsel and has been listening to this meeting." "With my consent," Devon added. Voss looked suddenly uncertain. "What is this, Mr. Edwards?" Devon said. "Could you please share with the board the information you provided to me yesterday regarding certain executive retreats charged to Zenwell's accounts?" "Certainly," Edwards replied. "During our review of executive expenses, we discovered recordings from a leadership retreat last quarter where Mr. Voss made several comments that violate company policy and potentially constitute discriminatory behavior." "What recordings?" Voss demanded. "This is fabricated. The recording device was in the conference room," Edwards explained. "Standard practice for all Zenwell executive functions. I have the relevant segment queued up if the board would like to hear it." Margaret nodded, and the room filled with Voss's voice, slightly tinny through the speaker. "Look, diversity initiatives are fine for the annual report, but let's be real. I don't need women questioning my decisions in the boardroom, and I certainly don't need to be counting how many minorities we hire. This is finance, not a charity." Voss lunged for the phone, but a security guard who had quietly entered the room restrained him. "That's taken out of context," he shouted. "This is a setup. There's more," Edwards continued. "Comments about cleaning house of deadweight, specifically referencing older employees and working mothers. This is the leadership style you were defending, Nathan?" Margaret asked, her voice cold. "The one that's supposedly necessary for Zenwell's success." "It's business," Voss insisted, though his voice had lost its certainty. "Sometimes difficult decisions have to be made. Treating people with dignity isn't a difficult decision. Clara spoke up, her voice quiet but firm. It's a fundamental one. As security escorted a protesting Voss from the room, the board turned to Devon. Mr. Carter, Margaret said, I believe we're ready to vote on your proposal. The vote was unanimous. By midday, news had spread throughout the building that Nathan Voss had been removed as CEO, pending a full investigation, and that Carter Equity Group had acquired a significant stake in Zenwell, with Devin Carter appointed to the board effective immediately. By afternoon, the story had hit the financial press. Billionaire janitor exposes CEO headlines dominated business news sites. Video of Voss being escorted from the Zenwell building went viral within hours. As Devon met with department heads to begin the transition, he was interrupted by his assistant. Sir, the staff is gathering in the lobby, she informed him. They're asking to speak with you. Devon made his way to the main lobby, where hundreds of Zenwell employees had assembled. When he appeared, a hush fell over the crowd. We heard what happened with Voss, someone called out. Is it true you worked here as a janitor? It's true, Devon confirmed. I wanted to understand Zenwell from the ground up. And now you're taking over. I'm investing in Zenwell's future, Devon corrected. A future where every employee is treated with respect, regardless of their position. Where ethical behavior is rewarded, not punished. Where success is measured not just by profit, but by impact. A spontaneous round of applause broke out, growing louder as it spread through the lobby. As the crowd dispersed, Devon noticed the maintenance team watching from a distance. He made his way over to them. Does this mean we're out of a job? Jim asked warily. New management usually cuts maintenance first. Actually, Devon replied. I'm doubling the maintenance budget and raising your wages effective immediately. You're not just keeping this building clean, you're keeping it running. That deserves recognition. Later that evening, as Devon prepared to leave for the day, he found Nathan Voss waiting in his new office. How did you get in here? Devon asked, his voice level. I still have friends in this building, Voss replied. His earlier fury had been replaced by a cold calculation. You've won this round, Carter. Congratulations. This isn't a game, Nathan. Oh, but it is, Voss disagreed. And you've changed the rules. The humble janitor revealing himself as the billionaire savior. Very dramatic. The press loves it. I didn't do this for press, Devon said. No? Then why the theatrics? Why not just approach the board directly as the investor you are? Would they have shown me who they really were? Would you? Devon asked. Power reveals truth, Nathan. When you thought I was beneath you, you showed me exactly who you are. Voss's smile didn't reach his eyes. And now you think you've destroyed me. I think you destroyed yourself, Devon corrected. Your choices, your treatment of others, your ethical lapses, those are what brought you down. Save the sermon, Voss snapped. You think this is over? I still have contacts throughout the industry. Friends and regulatory agencies. This is just the beginning. As Voss turned to leave, he paused at the door. You think you're untouchable because you played janitor for a few months? Because you championed a few nobodies? The system doesn't reward people like you, Carter. It eats them. Devon watched him go, then picked up his phone to call security. Nathan Voss should no longer have access to the building, he instructed. And review all digital access points immediately. After hanging up, he stared out at the city skyline, Voss's threat echoing in his mind. You think this is over? He had asked. No, Devon murmured to himself. It's just getting started. The morning after Nathan Voss's dramatic removal, Zenwell Capital buzzed with nervous energy. Employees gathered in small clusters throughout the building, voices hushed as they discussed the previous day's events. The story of the billionaire who had worked as a janitor to investigate the company from within had spread like wildfire, not just through Zenwell, but across the financial industry. In what had been Nathan's corner office, Devin Carter sat reviewing documents with Margaret Holloway, the silver-haired board member who had been appointed interim board chair. The damage is more extensive than we initially thought, Margaret said, sliding a financial report across the desk. Voss hid liabilities, inflated assets, and misrepresented our position to investors for quarters. Devon nodded grimly. I suspected as much. The question is whether it was just aggressive accounting or actual fraud. Our external auditors are saying the latter, Margaret replied. And they're worried about their own liability for not catching it sooner. A knock at the door interrupted them. Clara entered, looking professional but slightly overwhelmed in her new role as interim chief culture officer. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, "but there's something you should see." She handed Devon a tablet open to a financial news site. The headline blared, "Voss fights back. Former Zenwell CEO claims corporate espionage by billionaire janitor." "He's rallying his allies," Devon observed, scanning the article, "trying to spin this as a calculated takeover rather than an ethical intervention." "Will it work?" Clara asked worriedly. "Not once the financial irregularities become public," Margaret said, "which may be sooner than expected. I just got word that Thomas Reed is willing to come forward." "The junior accountant?" Clara asked in surprise. "The one Voss fired last month." Margaret nodded. "He says he has documentation of Voss directly ordering him to manipulate earnings reports. He was afraid to speak up before, but now he sees an opportunity to clear his name," Devon finished. "Set up a meeting with him and our legal team today." As Margaret left to make arrangements, Clara lingered. "The staff is on edge," she said. "Everyone's wondering what happens next. Some are afraid of losing their jobs in a restructuring." "Then let's address that directly," Devon replied. "Call an all-hands meeting for this afternoon." By 2 p.m., the largest conference space in the Zenwell building was packed with employees from every department. Faces showed a mix of anxiety, curiosity, and cautious hope as Devon took the floor. "I know many of you are concerned about your futures here," Devon began, his voice calm and measured. "So let me be clear. This is not a typical corporate takeover. There will be no mass layoffs, no slashing of benefits, no punishing of those who were just doing their jobs." A visible wave of relief passed through the crowd. "What will change is how Zenwell operates," Devon continued, "both in terms of financial transparency and corporate culture. We will rebuild this company on a foundation of integrity, respect, and genuine value creation." In the days that followed, Devon's words were put into action. Clara established listening sessions with every department, creating channels for employees to voice concerns without fear of retaliation. Margaret worked with external auditors to identify and correct financial misrepresentations. And Devon personally reviewed the cases of employees who had been terminated or demoted under Voss's regime, rehiring many who had been unfairly pushed out. Meanwhile, Nathan Voss was facing mounting problems of his own. A week after his removal, the preliminary SEC investigation expanded to include his personal finances. Word leaked that investigators had discovered suspicious transfers to offshore accounts coinciding with Zenwell's major downsizing initiatives. Thomas Reed's testimony proved devastating. In a closed session with SEC investigators, he provided emails and notes documenting direct orders from Voss to falsify financial statements. The evidence was damning enough that 3 other former Zenwell employees came forward with similar accounts that Voss's support began to crumble. Financial analysts, who had once praised his aggressive approach, now criticized his reckless disregard for regulatory compliance. Former allies in the industry distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with what was increasingly looking like a major financial scandal. 2 weeks into the investigation, Voss made a desperate attempt to shift the narrative. He called a press conference at his attorney's office, where he portrayed himself as the victim of a calculated corporate coup. Devin Carter infiltrated Zenwell under false pretenses, Voss told the assembled reporters. He gained access to confidential information while deliberately concealing his identity and intentions. If anyone should be under investigation, it's him. But the performance fell flat. By that afternoon, financial news networks were running side-by-side comparisons of Zenwell's stated financial position under Voss versus the reality being uncovered by auditors. The discrepancies were impossible to ignore. The final blow came when an anonymous former executive assistant to Voss provided recordings of him instructing staff to clean up documents before board meetings. Within hours of the recordings becoming public, Zenwell's board voted unanimously to terminate Voss for cause, eliminating his severance package and benefits. As Voss's legal problems mounted, Devon focused on rebuilding Zenwell from within. One evening, after most employees had gone home, he found himself standing in the lobby where, months earlier, Voss had refused to shake his hand. The memory seemed distant now, like something from another life. His phone rang. It was his assistant, Mr. Carter, you asked to be notified about any communications from Mr. Santoro. He's just sent an email requesting a meeting tomorrow. Thank you, Janet. Set it up. After ending the call, Devon left the building and drove to a small cemetery on the outskirts of the city. The autumn wind rustled the leaves as he made his way to a simple headstone. William Carter, 1945 to 2019 character. Is how you treat those who can do nothing for you. Devon placed a folded note on the grave, weighing it down with a small stone. It's finally being fixed, Dad, he said quietly. The fund that took your pension, they won't hurt anyone else. William Carter had been a factory foreman who had invested his life savings in a pension fund managed by a subsidiary of Zenwell. When the fund collapsed due to mismanagement and fraud, William lost everything. The stress contributed to his declining health, and he died before seeing any justice. The next morning, Devon met with Anthony Santoro and Leopold Weiss, the CEO of Global Financial Partners, one of the largest investment firms in the world. The financial community is impressed with how you've handled the Zenwell situation, Weiss said after pleasantries were exchanged. Particularly the way you've prioritized employees and ethical reforms alongside financial stabilization. That was always the goal, Devon replied. Which brings us to our proposal, Santoro said. Global is prepared to move forward with the $4 billion investment we initially discussed, with one condition, and that is that you take over as CEO of Zenwell, Weiss said, not just as an investor or board member. The markets need a clear signal that this reformation is permanent. Devon looked out the window, considering the offer. I never intended to run Zenwell. Carter Equity requires my attention. Sadie Marshall has effectively been running day-to-day operations at Carter for years, Santoro pointed out. And this would be temporary. 18 months, perhaps 2 years. Just long enough to right the ship completely. The employees would respond well to your leadership, Weiss added. You've already won their trust. That's not something money can. But Devon was silent for a long moment. Let me think about it. That afternoon, as Devon was still wrestling with the decision, Clara knocked on his office door. The board just issued the public apology, she said, handing him a tablet open to Zenwell's website. It's getting significant media coverage. The statement acknowledged the extraordinary measures taken by Devin Carter in his undercover investigation and apologized to employees and investors for the company's failure to maintain ethical standards under previous leadership. They're calling you the janitor who saved Wall Street, Clara said with a small smile. A bit dramatic, but the sentiment is genuine. The work is just beginning, Devon replied. Speaking of which, how are the department reorganizations coming along? Better than expected, Clara said. People are actually volunteering for the ethics committees. It's like they've been waiting for permission to do the right thing. Devon nodded thoughtfully. Sometimes all people need is the space to be their best selves. Is that why you did it? Clara asked. Worked as a janitor when you could have just bought the company outright? Money can buy control, Devon said after a moment. But it can't reveal truth. I needed to see who Zenwell really was when no one was looking. As Clara turned to leave, she paused at the door. For what it's worth, I think you should take the CEO position. The changes you've started won't last unless they're embedded in the culture. That takes time and the right leader. After she left, Devon sat in quiet contemplation. Outside his window, the city continued its relentless pace, but inside, a decision was crystallizing. The announcement that Devin Carter would assume the role of CEO at Zenwell Capital made the front page of the Wall Street Journal. The headline was simple but powerful. From janitor to CEO, Carter takes the helm at Zenwell. The markets responded immediately. Zenwell's stock, which had plummeted during the Voss investigation, surged 15% in a single day. Analysts praised the move as exactly the leadership signal investors needed to see. In his first official act as CEO, Devon called a company-wide gathering in the main lobby of the Zenwell building. Employees filled the space, with many standing on the sweeping staircase and leaning over railings from upper floors to hear him speak. Today marks a new beginning for Zenwell, Devon began. Not just in leadership, but in purpose. Financial success is important. It's why we exist as a company. But how we achieve that success matters just as much as the success itself. He paused, looking around at the assembled faces. Leadership isn't about position, it's about people. Every voice here matters now. Every perspective has value. We will build a company where ethical behavior is rewarded, where innovation is encouraged, and where respect is the foundation of all our interactions." The speech was met with enthusiastic applause, but the real work began immediately afterward. Devon implemented a flattened management structure, reduced executive compensation while increasing benefits for lower-level employees, and established a robust whistleblower protection program. 1 week after Devon's appointment, Carter Equity Group announced the acquisition of a controlling interest in Zenwell Capital. The $4 billion investment from global financial partners was finalized, providing the capital needed for Zenwell's transformation. Meanwhile, Clara found herself walking into what had once been the office of the HR director who had tried to demote her to the mailroom. The space had been redesigned, the imposing desk replaced with a round table, the dark wood paneling swapped for bright, open walls filled with employee recognition boards. Zenwell's new chief culture officer, Clara's first official act was to replace the outdated employee handbooks with a new document titled Workplace Dignity Initiative. The policy emphasized mutual respect, open communication, and a zero-tolerance approach to discrimination and harassment. "Is this really happening?" her assistant asked as they prepared for the policy's rollout. "Or will everything go back to normal once the spotlight fades?" "This is the new normal," Clara assured her. Devon doesn't do things for show. In the lobby of the Zenwell building, contractors were installing a new plaque where Voss had once humiliated Devon. The gold lettering reads simply, "Respect is the foundation of all wealth." When Devon came to view the installation, Jim, the janitor who had trained him months earlier, was polishing the marble nearby. "Fancy words," Jim commented. "But words are easy. Actions are what matter," Devon agreed. "Which is why the profit-sharing program starts next quarter. Everyone in this building, including maintenance staff, will participate." Jim's polishing slowed. "For real?" "For real," Devon confirmed. "And the educational assistance program should be finalized by end of month. I remember you mentioned your grandson wants to study engineering." Jim shook his head in amazement. "You remembered that?" "I remember everything about my time here, Jim. Especially the people who treated me with dignity when they thought I was just a janitor." As Devon continued the work of transforming Zenwell, Nathan Voss made one last desperate attempt to salvage his reputation. Through contacts at a conservative business publication, he leaked edited footage of Devon speaking angrily at a protest years earlier. The article accompanying the video suggested that Carter's radical views made him unfit to lead a major financial institution. The attack backfired spectacularly when Clara obtained and released the complete footage, which showed Devon defending pension fund investors after a major financial institution had defrauded them. The context made it clear that his anger had been righteous, not radical. "Nice try, Nathan," Devon murmured when he saw the full footage go viral. The rebuilding of Zenwell continued with remarkable speed. Toxic managers were removed, regardless of their financial performance. Departments were restructured to encourage collaboration rather than internal competition. And the Culture Oversight Committee, with Clara as chair, was given real authority to enforce standards of behavior throughout the organization. Most surprisingly to industry observers, these changes did not hamper Zenwell's performance, they enhanced it. As word spread of the company's transformation, top talent began applying for positions. Clients who had been wary of Zenwell's aggressive tactics under Voss returned, drawn by its new emphasis on transparency and ethical practice. 3 months into Devon's tenure as CEO, Zenwell stock had not only recovered from the Voss scandal, but had surpassed its previous high. Financial media outlets that had initially been skeptical of Carter's approach were now praising it as the turnaround of the decade. "It's not just about good publicity," Devon explained to a gathering of investment analysts. "It's about sustainable growth. When employees feel valued, they perform better. When clients trust you, they stay longer. When regulators see transparency, they create less friction. Ethics isn't just right, it's profitable." The speech was widely reported and sparked discussions throughout the financial industry about the relationship between corporate culture and long-term performance. As Zenwell flourished, Devon found himself facing an unexpected challenge, reconciling with those who had enabled Voss's reign. One evening, He received a meeting request from William Bennett, a former Zenwell board member who had resigned when the scandal broke. They met at a quiet cafe away from the financial district. Bennett, once an imposing figure in boardrooms, looked diminished somehow, as if the events of recent months had physically shrunk him. "I owe you an apology," Bennett began without preamble. "Not just for supporting Voss, but for what happened years ago." Devon's expression remained neutral. "You'll need to be more specific." 2009, Bennett said. "You were an analyst at Morgan Stanley. You raised concerns about predatory practices in certain investment vehicles, including ones that affected your father's pension fund. I was on the committee that reviewed those concerns and dismissed them," Devon added. Bennett nodded, his eyes downcast. "We were making too much money to listen. By the time the problems became undeniable, people like your father had already lost everything." "And now?" Devon asked. "Now I understand what it cost," Bennett replied. "Not just the money, but the trust, the human impact." He looked up. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that what you're doing at Zenwell, it matters. It's changing perspectives." Devon was quiet for a moment. "I'm not here to shame anyone, William. I'm here to build something better. If you've learned from the past, that's what matters now." As Bennett left, visibly moved by the exchange, Devon checked his phone to find an email that made him pause. It was an invitation to keynote the Global Finance Summit, the most prestigious gathering of financial leaders in the world. The last time he had been invited to speak, it was as a rising star at Morgan Stanley. He had walked away from that opportunity, and from Wall Street entirely, after his whistleblowing attempts were ignored and his father's savings were wiped out. Now, years later, they wanted him to address the very institutions he had once fled, but this time on his own terms, as the man who had transformed Zenwell by starting from the bottom. Devon stared at the invitation, memories of his journey flooding back. The humiliation of being dismissed as just a janitor. The quiet dignity of doing necessary work that others looked down upon. The insights gained by being invisible in plain sight. After a long moment, he typed a simple response. "I accept." As Devon pressed send, he reflected on how much had changed since that day in the Zenwell lobby when Nathan Voss had refused to shake his hand. What had begun as a personal quest for due diligence had evolved into something much larger, a blueprint for how the financial industry might reform itself from within. His phone rang. It was Sadie from Carter Equity. "Have you seen the news?" she asked without greeting. "Voss has been indicted on federal charges. Securities fraud, wire fraud, obstruction of justice, the works." "It was inevitable," Devon replied. "The evidence was overwhelming." "The press is calling for comments from you," Sadie continued. "What should I tell them?" Devon thought for a moment. "Tell them Zenwell is focused on the future, not the past. We're building something new here, something that honors the dignity of every person who contributes to our success." After ending the call, Devon stood at the window of his office, looking out at the city lights beginning to twinkle in the early evening. The summit was 6 weeks away. He would use that platform not just to tell Zenwell's story, but to challenge the entire industry to rethink its values. The last time he had been invited to the summit, he had walked away from it all. This time, he was going, not as part of the system, but as someone determined to change it. The morning of Nathan Voss's arrest was unseasonably cold. News crews had gathered outside his Riverside Drive penthouse before dawn, alerted by sources within the Justice Department that federal agents would be taking the former CEO into custody at precisely 7:30 a.m. Black SUVs pulled up to the building. Agents in dark jackets with FBI emblazoned across the back entered the lobby. 40 minutes later, Voss emerged, hands cuffed behind his back, his face a mask of barely contained fury as cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions. The perp walk had been carefully orchestrated to pass directly in front of the Zenwell Capital building. As Voss was led to the waiting vehicle, he glanced up at the gleaming tower where he had once reigned. His eyes narrowed when he spotted a figure watching from the executive floor. Devin Carter, standing quietly at the window, his expression solemn. Inside Zenwell, employees gathered around televisions and computer screens, watching the live coverage, with a mixture of vindication and disbelief. 5 counts of securities fraud, 2 counts of wire fraud, obstruction of justice, and embezzlement, Clara read from her tablet as she joined Devon at the window. "They're saying he could face up," to 20 years. Justice isn't about punishment, Devon replied quietly. It's about accountability and restoration. The indictment against Voss was damning. Prosecutors alleged he had systematically misrepresented Zenwell's financial position to investors, manipulated earnings reports to trigger personal bonuses, and diverted company funds to shell corporations he controlled. The investigation had uncovered evidence that he had been engaging in similar practices for years, even before joining Zenwell. As the case moved toward trial, the financial press dissected every detail. Former Zenwell employees came forward with stories of a toxic culture where ethical concerns were dismissed and whistleblowers were punished. Industry analysts who had once praised Voss's aggressive leadership style now condemned his reckless disregard for regulatory standards. 3 weeks after the arrest, the trial began. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters, financial industry observers, and curious onlookers as key witnesses arrived to testify. Clara's testimony came on the 4th day. She described the culture of fear Voss had created, where employees were afraid to speak up about misconduct. Her account of being demoted for refusing to lie to an executive's wife drew sympathetic nods from several jurors. Ms. Thompson, Voss's defense attorney, asked during cross-examination, "Isn't it true that you received a significant promotion after Mr. Carter took control of Zenwell? Might that color your testimony against my client?" Clara met his gaze steadily. "I was promoted because I was qualified. I'm testifying because it's the truth. Those aren't related." Thomas Reed, the former junior accountant, provided the most damaging testimony, producing emails in which Voss explicitly directed him to adjust financial statements before investor presentations. "He told me everyone does it," Reed testified. "He said if I wanted a career in finance, I needed to understand how the game is played." On the 6th day of the trial, Devon took the stand. The courtroom fell silent as he was sworn in. Voss watched him with undisguised contempt from the defense table. The prosecutor led Devon through his background and his decision to work undercover at Zenwell. "Some might view your methods as extreme, Mr. Carter," the prosecutor said. "Why go to such lengths? Why not simply conduct a traditional due diligence process?" Devon considered the question. "Financial statements tell you what a company wants you to see. Culture tells you what a company truly is. I needed to understand both." When Voss's attorney began cross-examination, his approach was aggressive. "Mr. Carter, isn't it true that your undercover operation was a form of corporate espionage? That you gained access to confidential information under false pretenses? I applied for a legitimate position and performed that job to the best of my ability," Devon replied calmly. "I observed what any employee could observe. I never accessed restricted documents unless they were left in plain view in public areas. And yet you used those observations to orchestrate a takeover of Zenwell," the attorney pressed. "I used those observations to make an informed investment decision," Devon corrected. The board's decision to remove Mr. Voss was based on evidence of financial misconduct that emerged independently. The attorney changed tactics. "Let's talk about your father's pension fund. Isn't it true that you had a personal vendetta against Zenwell because of losses suffered by your father years ago?" A murmur ran through the courtroom. Devon's expression remained composed, but his eyes hardened slightly. "My father invested in a fund that was mismanaged by a Zenwell subsidiary," he acknowledged. "That connection is what first brought Zenwell to my attention as a potential investment. But my actions were based on current conditions, not past grievances." The defense attorney smiled coldly. "So you expect the jury to believe that working as a janitor in the company that harmed your father was simply due diligence, not revenge?" "Objection," the prosecutor called. "Argumentative." "Sustained," the judge ruled. Devon leaned slightly forward. "I believe in justice, not revenge. The difference matters." As the trial continued, evidence mounted against Voss. Financial forensics experts detailed how he had manipulated Zenwell's books. Former associates testified about offshore accounts and shell companies. The prosecution played the damning recordings of Voss instructing staff to clean up documents before board meetings. The most dramatic moment came when the prosecution revealed a recorded call in which Voss ordered a subordinate to backdate documents to conceal a series of unauthorized transactions. The jury visibly reacted as Voss's voice filled the courtroom. "Just make it look right. No one checks these things if the numbers work." After 3 weeks of testimony, the case went to the jury. They deliberated for just over 6 hours before returning a guilty verdict on all counts. As the judge read the decision, Voss sat motionless, his face drained of color. When court officers moved to take him into custody, he finally spoke, turning to glare at Devon. "You think you've won," he said, his voice tight with rage. "But you've just made yourself a target. People like me built this system. People like you don't change it." Devon met his gaze but said nothing as Voss was led away. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed Devon, shouting questions about the verdict. He raised a hand for quiet before speaking. "Today isn't about winners and losers," he said. "It's about affirming that the financial industry must operate with integrity and transparency. The true measure of our success won't be this verdict, but the culture we build moving forward." In the weeks following the trial, Devon focused on putting those words into action. He announced the creation of a $200 million victim compensation fund, using a portion of the $4 billion investment to provide restitution to employees and investors who had been harmed under Voss's leadership. Financial institutions exist to create and protect value, Devon explained in the press release. When they fail in that duty, accountability must include making victims whole. The fund was unprecedented in its scope and structure. Unlike typical settlements that required victims to waive their right to further legal action, Zenwell's fund imposed no such restrictions. It also provided compensation for non-financial damages, including career setbacks for employees who had been fired for raising ethical concerns. The financial industry took notice. Several major firms announced reviews of their own compliance procedures. Business schools began incorporating the Zenwell case into their ethics curriculum, and regulatory agencies cited the compensation fund as a model for future enforcement actions. 6 months after Voss's conviction, Devon took another bold step. Carter Equity Group, his once private investment firm, filed for an initial public offering. The move surprised many in the financial world, as Devon had long advocated for the benefits of private ownership. "Why go public now?" a CNBC interviewer asked him the morning of the announcement. "Transparency," Devon replied simply. "We're asking other companies to operate with greater openness. We should hold ourselves to the same standard." The IPO was structured unlike any before it. While traditional offerings centered around the spectacle of executives ringing the opening bell at the stock exchange, Devon gave that honor to Carter Equity's maintenance staff. The image of Jim, the janitor who had trained Devon at Zenwell, ringing the bell alongside other service workers became instantly iconic. "A company isn't just its executives," Devon explained when asked about the gesture. "It's every person who contributes to its success at every level." As the date approached for Devon's keynote at the Global Finance Summit, anticipation built throughout the industry. The annual gathering brought together the most powerful figures in international finance: bank executives, hedge fund managers, regulatory officials, and policymakers. Devon had been working on his speech for weeks, revising and refining it. With the help of Clara and his team, the night before the summit, he made one final change, adding a personal story he had never shared publicly. The summit venue was packed to capacity as Devon took the stage. The audience fell silent, all eyes on the man whose journey from undercover janitor to reformist CEO had captivated the financial world. When people said janitors didn't belong at the top table, Devon began, his voice strong and clear. "They forgot who built the table." He paused, letting the metaphor sink in. "Every system we create, whether a company, an industry, or an economy, rests on the contributions of people at all levels. The question isn't whether everyone deserves dignity. The question is whether we're willing to build systems that reflect that truth." Devon then shared the story he had added the night before, how his father, a factory foreman with an 8th-grade education, had taught himself financial concepts to manage the union pension fund, only to see those savings wiped out by sophisticated financial products he didn't fully understand. "He trusted the experts," Devon said. "He trusted the system. Both failed him. Not because finance is inherently corrupt, but because we've allowed a culture where accountability flows down, but rarely up." The speech built to a powerful conclusion, challenging the assembled leaders to reimagine success in the financial industry. "The measure of our work isn't just the wealth we create for investors. It's the trust we build with all stakeholders. It's the dignity we afford to every person who touches our business. It's the legacy we leave for those who come after us." When Devon finished, the room was silent for a moment before erupting in sustained applause. Even those who had been skeptical of his methods were moved by his vision for a more ethical financial system. As he left the stage, Devon knew the speech would be analyzed and dissected in the days to come. Some would embrace his message, others would dismiss it as idealistic. But the conversation had begun, and that was what mattered most. Back at Zenwell, Clara continued to thrive in her role as Chief People Officer. Her workplace dignity initiative had become a model for other companies seeking to reform toxic cultures. She had been invited to give a TED Talk about the program, which quickly went viral, further elevating Zenwell's profile as a leader in corporate culture transformation. "The most powerful man who once mopped a floor showed me that leadership isn't about title or status," Clara said in her talk. "It's about seeing the humanity in everyone and creating spaces where that humanity can flourish." The talk resonated far beyond the financial industry, sparking discussions about dignity in workplaces across sectors. Clara began receiving invitations to speak at conferences and consult with other companies, establishing herself as an authority on ethical corporate culture. Meanwhile, Nathan Voss began serving his 15-year sentence at a federal prison in Pennsylvania. Once the subject of glowing profiles in business magazines, he was now largely forgotten. A cautionary tale referenced in ethics seminars and regulatory briefings. 1 year after Devin Carter first walked into the Zenwell Capital building as a janitor, the company was unrecognizable. Employee retention had soared to an industry-leading 93%. The firm had been ranked the #1 ethical investment company in North America by 3 independent evaluators, and its financial performance had exceeded even the most optimistic projections. With assets under management growing by 27% in a single year, that on the anniversary of his first day, Devon gathered with the board to discuss the future. The meeting was held not in the executive boardroom, but in a new space created on the ground floor, a circular room with glass walls, symbolizing the transparency that had become Zenwell's hallmark. "The transition period we outlined is coming to an end," Margaret Holloway noted. "The question is whether you intend to continue as CEO or return to Carter Equity full-time." Devon looked around the table. "I believe we've established a foundation strong enough to sustain itself with the right leadership. Sadie has been running Carter Equity successfully in my absence. It may be time for a new chapter for Zenwell." "Do you have someone in mind?" another board member asked. Devon smiled. "I do." Later that day, Clara was surprised to be called to Devon's office. When she arrived, she found him standing at the window, looking out at the city. "I have a proposition for you," he said, turning to face her. "The board has approved my recommendation that you become Zenwell's next CEO." Clara stared at him in shock. "Me? But I've only been an executive for a year." "You've demonstrated exceptional leadership," Devon replied. "You understand this company from multiple perspectives. And most importantly, you embody the values we want Zenwell to represent going forward." "What about you?" Clara asked. "Where will you go?" "I'm establishing the Carter Foundation," Devon explained. "A philanthropic organization focused on creating economic opportunities for those without legacy advantages or connections. It's time to build something new." The announcement of Clara's appointment was met with enthusiasm throughout Zenwell. Employees who had known her as a receptionist saw her rise as evidence that the company's commitment to recognizing talent at all levels was genuine. Under Clara's leadership, Zenwell launched Project Voice, a national platform designed to help entry-level staff speak out against workplace abuse across the financial industry. The initiative provided resources, legal support, and career counseling to employees who faced retaliation for reporting misconduct. As Zenwell continued to thrive, Nathan Voss languished in prison. Reports from those who encountered him described a bitter man, still blaming others for his downfall. In his prison-issued uniform, largely ignored by fellow inmates who had no interest in financial crimes, he was a shadow of the imposing figure who had once commanded boardrooms. Meanwhile, Devon's Carter Foundation quickly established itself as a force for change in the financial world. The foundation provided scholarships to low-income students interested in finance and business, focusing particularly on those without family connections or inherited advantages. The greatest untapped resource in our economy is human potential, Devon often said when describing the foundation's mission. Too many brilliant minds never get the opportunity to contribute because of systemic barriers. One morning, about 18 months after the foundation's launch, Devon visited Zenwell to meet with Clara about a potential collaboration. As he entered the lobby, he noticed a young janitor holding the elevator door for a group of executives. The janitor nodded politely to each person, but most passed without acknowledgement. One executive, looking impatient, muttered something dismissive as he brushed past the young man. Devon stepped into the elevator just as the doors were closing. "Excuse me," Devon said to the executive who had been rude. "I don't believe you thanked this gentleman for holding the door." The executive looked startled. "I what? This man took the time to hold the door for you," Devon continued pleasantly. "The least you could do is acknowledge him." The elevator fell silent. The executive, recognizing Devon, flushed with embarrassment. "You're right," he said, turning to the janitor. "Thank you. I appreciate it." The janitor looked surprised but nodded. "No problem, sir." As the elevator continued upward, Devon smiled at the young man. "What's your name?" "Marcus, sir." "Good to meet you, Marcus." "I'm Devon." After his meeting with Clara, Devon took a detour through the maintenance department. He found Jim, now the facilities manager, reviewing schedules with his team. "Devon," Jim exclaimed, breaking into a broad smile. "What brings you to our corner of the world?" "Just visiting," Devon replied, accepting Jim's handshake. "How are things in the trenches?" "Better than I ever imagined possible," Jim said honestly. "Full benefits, fair pay, actual respect from management. Some days I still can't believe it." They chatted for a while, catching up on personal news and company developments. As Devon prepared to leave, Jim called after him. "You know what's funny? Some of the new folks don't even believe you really worked here as a janitor. They think it's just a company legend." Devon laughed. "Let them think what they want. The truth isn't how they're treated now." As Devon made his way through the lobby, he noticed a young intern nervously approaching him. "Mr. Carter? I'm sorry to bother you. But are you really the janitor guy? The one from the case study we read in business school?" Devon smiled warmly. "That's still my favorite title. I just wanted to say, it changed how I think about business. About leadership." The intern hesitated. "Do you think it really changed anything? In the bigger picture, I mean?" Devon considered the question thoughtfully. Change is rarely dramatic or immediate. It happens person by person, decision by decision. The true measure isn't what happened at Zenwell. It's what happens when people like you take these lessons into your own careers. Later that week, Clara gave a talk at a national business conference. The audience was filled with executives, many from the financial sector, eager to hear about Zenwell's transformation. "When I was a receptionist," Clara began, "I was invisible to most of the people who ran my company. Today, as CEO, I make it my mission to see everyone. Because dignity isn't a luxury, it's a foundation." She went on to share data showing how Zenwell's ethical reforms had coincided with exceptional financial performance, challenging the notion that treating people well came at the expense of profitability. "The most powerful lesson I learned from Devin Carter wasn't about finance or strategy," she concluded. "It was about the difference that one person can make when they refuse to accept that this is just how things are done." Back in his office, at the Carter Foundation, Devon was reviewing applications for the upcoming scholarship cycle when his assistant knocked on the door. "There's something you should see," she said, handing him a tablet open to a news article. The headline read, "Whistleblower alleges systemic fraud at Global Investments Limited." As Devon scanned the article, he recognized the pattern: financial misrepresentations, toxic culture, retaliation against those who raised concerns. It was Zenwell all over again, just with a different name. His phone chimed with an encrypted email notification. The sender was anonymous, but the message was clear. "Found another one. Worse than Zenwell. Need your help." Devon sighed and whispered, "Not again." Then he began to read the attached documents, his resolve hardening with each page. The work wasn't finished. Perhaps it never would be. But he had shown that change was possible, that systems could be reformed, that dignity could prevail. Outside his window, a new day was dawning over the city. In offices, stores, factories, and homes, millions of people were preparing to go to work. each one deserving of the respect that Devon had been denied that day in the Zenwell lobby. He picked up his phone and began to type a response to the whistleblower. The cycle would continue. The work would go on. And maybe, one person at a time, the world would change. Walking out of his building that evening, Devon passed a janitor mopping the lobby floor. He paused, holding the door open. For the man. Thank you, the janitor said, surprised. Devon nodded. Thank you for your work. They exchanged a look of mutual respect before Devon continued on his way, the words of his father echoing in his mind. Respect isn't earned by position. It's earned by how you treat those without one. What would you do if someone refused to shake your hand today? Could you see it as the moment that changes everything? If this story moved you, please like, subscribe, and share to experience more powerful narratives that challenge how we see the world around us.